Everybody, welcome to the earliest alert. Brian Good here on this Monday as we continue to track Irma, now a tropical storm, as it continues to weaken, moving inland. I love looking at the satellite image, though. You can see the different levels of the flow here across the northern part of Florida into southern areas of Georgia, where you're seeing where certainly the circulation still is, how strong the wind fields are aloft with it, but all the better moisture is in the northern and northeast part of it. The quadrants that we were talking about are the most intense usually on hurricanes. Dry air is working its way in on the southern flank, and that has really just cut off the rain on the southern side. Still get some gusty winds, but look how much of that rain shield. I mean, the brighter the colors, the more intense it was with these heavy rain bands that moved over Jacksonville, producing that flash flood emergency, and then all that mess in through Savannah and Charleston here before it fades out in northern areas of South Carolina. All right, so currently wind gusts, still with the dry air punch. This is a look at the water vapor. You can see that still getting gusts around 47 miles per hour. We're all at Disney World. In Jacksonville, about 59. In Savannah, 48. In Charleston, 40 current gusts there. These bands, now it looks like mainly two. There was one main one that was dominant most of the morning, producing the biggest problems for Jacksonville. It still can produce a brief tornado as they move on shore from the Atlantic, but that seems to be fading out more and more. This will all work its way north and west. In fact, don't see this very often. Tropical storm warnings all the way to the Tennessee border, north of Atlanta, and all the way through a good chunk of the east half there of Alabama. Tropical storm warning is in effect. Notice it's Alabama because the system, the core of it, is going to be drifting more west of north instead of north of west in time, and that's important to note that. In fact, the cloud cover is streaming already well in advance of it. We've got it now over a good chunk of wave country. Those of you in Indiana have a better chance to get into the 70s today. Kentucky likely to stay into the 60s. It just depends on the thickness of the clouds. But overall, I think we're going to have a split viewing area on how warm we get. The rain is lagging behind a bit, a good 200 miles away from us. And it's going to take a little while to get over the mountains, which is an interesting question that came up because depending on the angle at which Irma approaches, if you end up getting a lot of your rain bands coming through the mountains themselves, they actually can fizzle out and fade due to the downsloping effect being pulled in from the Atlantic. So if Irma were to angle itself a little more into this area, we really would see these bands of rain that are in the forecast likely not really take shape. But as it stands now, it should move into western Tennessee. So some of these bands can likely at least get around some part of the Smoky Mountains and work their way north. But that's something we'll be monitoring, is how much the mountains can disrupt some of these bands from holding together as they're pulled in and then pushed right into, rotated around into central areas of Kentucky. That's something we'll be monitoring there. All right, so here is current radar to show you the high-res model, how it's trending here with these bands of rain. Again, the first rounds look to be still to our south even for this afternoon, so dry today. Now tonight, looking fine at supper time, but then later on, we start to get the first round of these bands showing up across our southern tier of counties, and then as we get toward the morning rush for tomorrow, that's when we start to run into some of these bands moving into the area. But notice what's happening. It's starting to pick up on some of the bands being disrupted through the mountains there, and then they get like a dry pocket. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They can certainly reform again once they get back into that more moisture flow, I guess if you will, closer to the low itself in our neck of the woods. But it's hard to imagine there would be some type of disruption there from the Smokies. We'll see. Even as we head into Tuesday, you see the same thing in the animation. They form like crazy over here, but then they fall apart and then kind of reform again. And that's really going to help us in the rain totals too, by the way. As long as that can help us out. The more west that can stretch as far as that downsloping effect and making them fade out, the better it'll be for a lot of us, but we'll see how that plays out. Let me give you a close-hand view of the model on this, starting tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. You see how it's got one band pushing through, then another band kind of pivots around, northeast winds. Tough to get a lot of warming in here. It may get some breaks every now and then to get us into the 70s, but we'll see how it plays out. Now, just like typical with hurricanes, each one of these little rain bands can produce like a squall, if you will, a little burst of wind. And the models are sensing that. I think overall we'll have winds around 20 miles per hour, gusts at times to around 30, but there could be one or two of those little rain bands that could try to squeeze out a 30, 35 mile per hour wind gust out of it as it swings by. But I don't, again, see that being a widespread issue, and it looks to be below advisory level. So, again, we get the weaker version of all of this. Now, the system is going to stall out over western Tennessee until we get a little trough. A little front's going to pass the Great Lakes. It's not going to come all the way through here. It's going to just go across the Great Lakes. And because it grazes the Great Lakes, it just sees Irma and just latches onto it. It says, come with me, basically. So Irma's going to give us some clouds and spotty showers around Wednesday, and then Thursday, the little trough comes in and pulls Irma out as we head into Friday, and that will set the stage for it. It looks to be a really warm weekend coming our way. So, all together, looking at the rain total, starting late tonight, all the way through, it gets pulled away. They're not the totals like Harvey, all right? We're talking about 1 inch is a good possibility for Kentucky, I would think. Lesser amounts for Indiana, and any amount that you see there that could be closer to 2 inches is going to depend on some of those little banding features and if they can survive over the mountains. So I'd be a little more skeptical for the far eastern numbers there than I would be for those in central Kentucky. So that's something to monitor. Now, for the meantime, while we're working on this outlook, we've also got our eyes on Jose, which is still out there, still a hurricane. Category 2, and we were talking about this loop-de-loop thing with Jose. Well, sure enough, that's the official forecast, is a loop-de-loop with Jose tracking to the north, come back around, da-da-da-da-da. All right, so what happens after that? Well, for our area, it really will depend on how many fronts pass through, because when you look at the different model ideas, that's a lot to look at. Makes your head just go nuts on trying to figure out. I mean, they all pretty much agree on a loop-de-loop idea, but they all, toward the tail end, show a turn that's going to happen, and that's because we have a series of fronts moving through the lower 48, and those fronts will help more than likely do the same thing as that weak front coming in later this week, pulls on Irma and pulls Irma out of our area. These fronts will do the same thing to Jose as they move through. The first one is the one that I think that as we into early next week should be the one that will latch on to Jose. Speed is everything, and the intensity of that front too, so it will depend on how strong it is to pull on Jose. If not, Jose could try to get into the Outer Banks or perhaps in the Mid-Atlantic. Too early to say for sure on that. But again, that front there doesn't look like it has much of a handle on it, but the next one may. So we'll see how that plays out. I think the Euro has done a great job so far this season, and I think that's the one to pay attention to when we get closer in time for that kind of forecast. So what we'll do is we'll trend with 80s back in the forecast, maybe some upper 80s this weekend after we get rid of Irma. And then we got this front moving in close to the 19th. That'll be the one that'll help push whatever's out there in the Atlantic out. And then we get into somewhat of a fall setup for a little while as we actually end our fall, coming up on the 22nd, so a week from Friday. That's it for today, guys. We'll see you on midday.